Mine's working.
Hello. There we go. Hey. All right. So we're going to be talking about going beyond the device. I have this little thing prepared here. So the mobile market is broadening. There's new devices, like there's the Kindle Fire, there's iPad, there's regular mobile devices, new OSs, Android's coming out with updates, iOS 5, you name it. There's a lot going on in that atmosphere these days. And I think everyone in the room is probably aware of the fact that people are reading their emails on a mobile device. And you've probably heard a little bit about what to do about that. So now the kind of question is, where do we go beyond that? Like, what's next in mobile email? What's beyond the device? So I guess the question I'm posing to both Wakara and Alex here, who I'll introduce in a moment, but also to the rest of you, I want to make this interactive as we can, is what are we doing to address this beyond technology things? You've heard about some of the approaches you can take, making big buttons, making bigger buttons in your emails, bigger text, going with a skinny layout, doing responsive design. Those are all very creative and technological things, but what about things like resources and budget and the psychology of the consumer? So there's a good segue, I think, from Matt's presentation and then Ken's as well. We're talking about how 15, 13, maybe even 30% of people are opening on a mobile device, and just what are we doing about that? So as by way of introductions, I'm Justine. I am the marketing director at Litmus. And Litmus is a small software company that builds, okay. As Dave starts chuckling in the corner of the audience. So Litmus is a small software company that makes rendering and analytics tools for email marketers. You can, find where people are opening on mobile devices, what they look like on a mobile device. And what makes my job really interesting is that I'm not only like a B2B marketer for Litmus, but I'm also talking to our customers all the time and hearing about their challenges in the space as well. So it makes my job a lot of fun and makes my opinion a little interesting sometimes. So over here, I've got Alex, who is a senior digital strategist, I believe, at Trendline Interactive. And so he works on creative content and digital strategy for Trendline clients. You can talk a little bit more about what he does. And I've also got Wakara Yeomans, who is a creative director at Responsus. She's got 4 years in email creative, was a part of the original Smith-Harmon team that came over on board at Responsus. We're co-members of the EEC Design Roundtable together. She's a writer for the New School Marketing blog, and I believe she also has an Email Insider column. And we are both crazy cat ladies.
It's true.
Yes, indeed. I'm sure that's something to be proud of, but we'll go with it. Cool. Anything else you guys want to add about yourselves or your experience?
Just want to say hello to all the people watching all around the world.
Hello. Great. Cool. Well, let's kick it off. I want to talk about, again, there's a lot of approaches that we can do for mobile email these days, and they probably have various impacts on business or various impacts to the creative teams that are involved and also from a resource perspective. So when it comes to the successes and failures of those things, just what's going on? Like, how are we approaching this? What are businesses doing about it?
Go for it.
Okay. Well, the one thing I've seen the most is that the device makeup and the percentage of mobile audience varies greatly from client to client. So I had one particular client when we were going in and we saw almost 35% of their opens were just on iPhone and iPad. Another 7% on some other devices. So you're almost getting to half on certain people. And then other clients are, trickling in at 2 or 3%. So, I think looking at that type of data and then matching that up and trying to look at consistencies of the browsers that are coming to your site gives you a very clear picture of what you need to be doing. And if the data isn't there to support this mobile type of thing with your particular audience, you don't need to panic. But if it is there, you do need to panic and you need to rethink your whole approach to what time you send, what's in your message, and then you have to make a choice on how you're going to address that in your designs and technically.
So making an informed decision about what's going on there in terms of mobile and what to do about it.
Yes.
All right. So out of curiosity, who in the audience has done that testing to find out where people are opening? Show of hands. Right? Not as many as I maybe thought of. And so how many of you have decided to do something about it based upon that data? Okay, probably about half of those that have done the research. That's really interesting. The other thing I'm kind of curious about is the breakdown of mobile devices in the room. So I'm going to start with kind of like the more obscure and work down to the more broad. Is anyone here on a Windows Mobile 7 phone, out of curiosity? I actually kind of like Windows 7. No one. All right.
I saw one at the airport the other day.
Actually, it's not a bad user experience.
Yeah, it's pretty nice.
Yeah, I kind of like it. How about a BlackBerry? Who's on the old school BlackBerries in here? All right, actually quite a few. Who's using an Android? I know Wakar is an Android user, mostly for testing purposes and not very happy about it.
It's true. I'm the only creative on an Android. It's rough.
iPhone? All right, most of everybody. And anything else I missed? Is someone using something else? Anyone on Palm? Seriously, we got one Palm user. Great. Can we send you some creatives that you can take some screenshots for us? All right, cool.
Do they do screenshots on Palm?
And so the other thing that kind of ties into this is we talk about email a lot, but also I think sites and apps factor into this. So we're just talking about email. So how many of you maybe haven't embarked upon a mobile optimization project for email, but you're doing so for web, or you've got like a site or an app of some sort? Okay, a few too. Cool. All right, so I guess sort of moving on after doing that little bit of that audience poll. So we've seen a lot of people dive headfirst in the discovery aspect of things. So are you seeing any other, data coming in through that feed? We're looking at mobile opens, but are you tying any of that data back to like clicks, conversions, other success metrics? I know we talked about yesterday how it doesn't just start with the open, and I got in a heated conversation about what makes it inactive or not. But what about that? What other data are you looking at to sort of make this choice?
I know my customers have been seeing an element of drop-off once the click-through happens, just because of where the mobile web is and what the customers are expecting and whether or not their mobile site actually delivers on that experience. And I think a lot of folks are used to, like, they were able to interact with their email first on their smartphone before people had mobile sites. So they're kind of expecting a poor experience. So we did see a huge decline in click-through initially, but we're starting to see that pick up, and then kind of testing the user experience and the wayfinding as they get through your site has been interesting too.
Have you seen any difference between click-through conversions going from a mobile optimized email to a mobile optimized site, or a mobile optimized email to a non-mobile optimized site?
I think we've seen a huger drop-off when they go to a non-optimized site, just because it is harder to interact with the content. And depending on if you're a retailer or B2B or whatever you're trying to do, getting your content so that it's easy to consume on a mobile device is not an easy task. So if they need to be reading a long article, making sure that it's formatted so that it's easy to read on their phone.
That's actually a good segue into one of the other questions. Talking about content on a mobile device, you're looking at a smaller screen, the type is probably smaller. So what other factors, I guess, kind of come into that play if you're talking about doing mobile optimization, both for an email or a site?
Well, there's a level of training. Like, I had my own experience one time with Forbes, who I believe they've finally done a mobile site, but every time I clicked on a link in Twitter, I went to an empty shell. There's like just nothing there. It was like a top and a bottom. And so when I'd see it, I knew, okay, if I click on this, this is gonna happen. And like, my pet peeve is if you have a mobile version of your email and it's Times New Roman text, what do they think is going to happen when they click? You're training them that we're not good at this, basically. So, you have to, I think, go overboard and promote how mobile-friendly your things are. You can buy on our new mobile site. You have to, like, educate people, and that's, like, from that engagement part. And especially, like, one data point I think people really need to take a hard look at is like, everybody wants to send things in the morning. Who checks email before they get out of bed? Right? Are they going to go in the morning and click and download the latest white paper on engagement metrics from their bed and their pajamas on their phone? No, they're not. So you have to look at, I think, what you're trying to get them to do specifically, and put the amount of effort that it's going to take. So, they're going to get them out. They're going to have to deal with the message again at some point for most people. So if it's a conversion type of thing or a buying type of thing, really look at when is the best time for them to actually go through this process. And if it's a form with 10 fields on it, they're not going to fill it out from their phone.
So considering both context and content of when you're going to send your message might factor into whether or not you even send a message that's optimized for mobile. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think so. And I also think the context piece plays into it really in a major way. I mean, people are interacting with their email inbox in a way that they never had before. I mean, they could be checking while they're waiting for their lunch order to be completed. They're standing at the microwave. So it's so important that if you have something that you need them to act on, that you make it so compelling that they can't help but click on it or interact with it or come back to it later. So it's almost kind of becoming more of like an advertising channel in that way.
Cool. So content and strategy cost money.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about investment into just mobile marketing or mobile email. What should folks expect about that? What's a realistic guideline? What kind of successes or failures have you seen in trying to get this done when it comes down to the wire here?
We've been recently investing in even multiple devices to be doing testing on as well, so that we're checking for user experience reasons. And I would also say, if you're doing the kind of coding that requires, media queries, and you're looking at responsive design that works on multiple devices, that takes twice as long to develop, because you're essentially creating two versions that render based on whichever device opens the email at that time. So I think expect to spend more time and money and thought on these pieces, because you want to make sure that experience doesn't, that you're meeting the expectations of the customers. They expect it to work a certain way. They expect everybody to kind of be knowing how to do this already.
That's interesting. At Litmus, actually, we use, like I said, I'm a marketer too. Like, I send emails too, and we kind of want to eat our own dog food, right? We talk about mobile email all the time, and so we're trying to practice what we preach. And we recently developed a new set of email creative for a new template we're going to be rolling out. And looking back, I've learned a lot through this experience. The original design wasn't intended at first to also be optimized with media queries, and it's been extremely challenging for us to take this design and make it media queryable. And so thinking from the start of that process and saying, all right, how are we going to develop a new design, or how are we going to develop our content so it's in order to do this the really right way. And so that's been a really interesting experience for us too, because it's taken, I think, a lot longer than we anticipated, and we kind of did things a little bit out of order. So it's definitely interesting.
And think about this, like the one for the responsive design, responsive plug there. The responsive design part of it, being able to basically look at the screen size that it's being used on versus the device. Right, so we don't have to pick iPhone or Android. We can just say 420 or 320, 480, like one of these type of things, and change things up. But think about like the whitelist, right? Are we really going to add a company to our mobile phone address book? Like, am I going to put you in my contacts?
Is there a mobile phone address book?
What's that?
Is there a mobile phone? Oh, yeah, that's the contacts in your phone.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
And
So
sure.
it's
in
like,
Android, it ties back to your Google account.
it's like Macy's, Marketo,
Yeah.
Mom.
Yeah.
Like, it's not, it's you just have to like think these things through, and a lot of it's just common sense, and sometimes you just have to get there, and that's the hard testing part. There's the one side of like, okay, what are we going to do, and how does it visually look, and then there's the other part of just like being your own user and looking at what can we take away from this, and removing the clutter.
Or knowing that desktop strategies might not always apply. Like if you're using an address book part of your header, maybe that doesn't make a lot of sense on a mobile device.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think kind of also talking about using your own device to be testing and looking at things, if the majority of your list is on an iPhone, you're on an iPhone, you can use kind of scalable design tricks and things like that to really optimize for mobile without having to go the full media query route. But once you start to have a higher percentage that are Android and other kinds of devices, that's really when you would want to start experimenting and going that route. I mean, iPhone makes mobile email really easy. And that was the biggest reason why I switched to Android, because my team is creative people. We're all on iPhones. We're making all these recommendations about mobile based on iPhones. And once I had an Android, it totally blew apart what we thought was really true. So we've been doing a lot of testing about what the screen size mean. How does that resolution really translate over? Has a larger screen size, but the pixels per inch are different. So there's a lot of minute, detailed testing that needs to go into figuring out how your emails will look good on these other devices too.
And I would say, like, from the budgeting standpoint, you're not going to be able to get away with the bang us out or blasting email blasts. I heard that. I love that. Can you blast that blast? But the quick turn of that type of stuff, if you really want to test for all of these type of things, we can't do it that fast. Got to give us a little bit more lead time.
Yeah,
And
it has to be out of the production cycle. Take that time outside of a campaign you're trying to get out the door and do your testing there, and then roll it out to your campaigns. Don't try to do it in a scheduled campaign.
And I think, like, one aspect is, you can kind of fire up your creatives again about email, because I know, like, I was talking to Anna, who's somewhere out there.
There she is.
There she is in the back. But this has excited everybody who deals with this, because it's like, oh, it's not just nested tables and can't do this, can't do that. So, like, if you actually have some talent in production or design, let them think through these options and do some one-offs to test that part of it before you go in and, like, redo your template. And I think you'll see, if you put the resources to it and give people some time to experiment now with the new way of doing things, they'll be excited and they'll come up with some good things.
Yeah, I think creative folks are often excited about new challenges, right? Constraints sometimes born
Finally.
Innovative solutions. Have you guys seen any, I guess, let's talk dollars and cents, like ROI. We talked about maybe readjusting expectations for getting this stuff done. But once it finally goes out the door, have you seen increased performance, higher ROI? What about performance of emails that have been optimized for mobile?
Well, the one thing is like, I've been working on a lot trying to deal with the elephant in the room, which is apps, right? So apps versus the mobile web are a challenge. And I had one particular client, and they have their own app, and going to trying to get people to open that app up and link to content inside of it. You can do it. It's techie and it's tough. There are URLs in apps, but I call them mutant URLs. So, and then the one example too is like Facebook. You've seen people do the Facebook like campaigns. Like us on Facebook. Well, or go to this tab. They'll try to launch you to like a tab homepage. Tabs don't really work on mobile web Facebook. So working on, okay, if they're on an iPhone, let's use our URL scheme and go right into our company page and hit the like button, versus going to this bad, weird mobile Facebook type of thing. So trying to figure out how to get in and work with the apps. When you do that, you get huge success with it because it's easy. It just swaps things out and they don't have to think about it too much.
So being more aware of the possible roadblocks when it comes to technology too, where diversity of where people might be viewing. So if I'm, for whatever reason, reading email on my Kindle Fire, that might change, my behavior as a consumer, or the abilities of the device that I have to follow through on the call to action.
Yeah, and that feeds into what we heard yesterday too, of making sure that you go through that user experience that your customer's about to take, so you find all those gotchas and you know where it's going to be bad and where it's going to be good, and make that decision on purpose.
Yeah. There's nothing more frustrating to a consumer than wanting to follow through on the call to action and not being able to.
Mm-hmm.
And latency and bandwidth, I mean, you want to talk about the images and email debate, like literally people aren't online, or they have one bar of a 3G connection. So, if they get a repeated experience where, I'm going to open this thing up and it's going to slowly load this big, heading type of image, you're just training them not to want to do it. So you really have to optimize for the fact that this person might not be online at all.
Definitely.
But they have my message.
So how many of you out there have a mobile app? Have like an iPhone or an Android app or that type of thing? That's a decent amount. So let's actually talk about that for a couple minutes. For folks that have apps or a mobile app of some type, what are like special considerations, or what should they be aware of, or what would we recommend for folks that are maybe doing email for apps and vice versa?
Well, you definitely need to get your own URL scheme. So there's you can register. So like an example is like Vivo : / and then it's like their URL type of thing. So all of if you have a mobile app and a mobile website, and from email you want to go to it, you can basically do routing. So if it's like, okay, if they have the app, open up the iPhone app. If they don't, send them here. If they have iPhone but they don't have our app, send them into the iTunes store. So you just kind of have to think through the paths. But I know like with publishers, they probably want the mobile page view because the apps don't have as much of the advertising piece of it. There's a dark cloud over what's happening in these apps, and you have to learn how to tie those metrics on the back end all the way around to the email program and try to get some insight.
And speaking from an email perspective, I know personally I'm a big fan of the Runkeeper app. I run and I like to use Runkeeper, and their emails are really nice. I can tell they've thought about the mobile experience because you think, well, if I'm a mobile app user, chances are I probably frequently read my email on my phone too. So I find it really nice that Runkeeper has made that connection, and they've really, I think, optimized their emails. They've got a lot of white space. There's a nice big button. I got an email recently that was asking me to download the latest version of the app, and it had a nice big button that took me right to the app from my email. But there was a competitor's product who I also get their emails because I tried their app, and they sent a similar kind of email, but the whole email, the text was really, really tiny. It was like the upgrade link was like buried like at the bottom of the email, and there were tiny little text links, and it asked me to download both the Android and the iPhone app. And I'm like, they can know which one I'm using. Like they've got the data for that. So what about like creative when it comes to like an app kind of email?
Well, I think it's important to understand what content is in that app as well, and to know why people would go back. Because there's the stat of so many apps are only opened once and never back again. But depending on what your app is doing and why that experience is better than going to your mobile website, and making sure that you make that compelling in the email. The other thing that I've really enjoyed is the airlines are really good about when you sign up to get, or you want to get a mobile boarding pass, they send you a mobile email. And you can start to understand if someone is asking for mobile things from you, you can start to assume that they want to also get mobile emails as well, or they will be interacting with you that way. So.
I would say the thing you have to do mobile from a content standpoint is stop being so cutesy. Just say, we have a new app, download now, versus like, apptastic. Or like tricking people into this thing, because they're not gonna. I mean, we see like we run Litmus for a lot of clients, and you'll have like 2 seconds. So drop I call it the Mad Men stuff. Drop the Mad Men stuff and speak to people straight ahead, and it performs better.
And the reality is there's no real way to drive people to your app other than emails and their phones, and if they stumble upon your mobile website. So really, like tying your email as a way to tell everybody about your app is the basic way that you should be communicating about it.
Totally, and one thing you can do also is like, okay, if you're promoting an app in an email, you've obviously got a main call to action. You've probably got a picture of a phone. It's like these type of things, but that's also probably a profiling opportunity. It's like, don't have a phone, tell us more, and try to use that to get a little bit more of information, right? Figure out if they don't have a phone, what do they have, Where are you checking your email? Like use it as information gathering if they're not going to download the app.
That's smart. So talking a lot about phones, what about tablets? Are they a mobile device?
Hold on, sorry. I don't think so.
I don't think so
Speaking
either.
of the microphone.
Oh, sorry. Was that the phone? The one thing like most, I think the mobile device has is it's like that single view type of experience. So when you're in it, you're kind of, it's just your screen and that, and the email client on the iPad at least, most people I see are checking it in landscape mode. And there's that column on the left-hand side, so it looks more like a traditional email client. And then some of the responsive stuff is really easy for just iPad optimization. It's, change the fonts, work with that 768 or what have you. So I don't consider it as much a mobile email.
Yeah, I think eventually your desktop version will be your tablet version. I mean, the tablet renders your emails just as well as your laptop, desktop computer. It works just fine. And also people are more likely to convert on tablets. I mean, we've seen as much as 5 times higher conversion rate when they open on a tablet versus their smartphone. So that's really a place too that you want to optimize that experience for them. Because that's where people are ultimately going to be engaging with your content, and it's not as quick of a scroll through medium the way your smartphone is. The tablet is something that usually you kind of have a chance to sit back, you're engaging with content, you're reading things, you're looking at stuff, you're exploring. It's still really fun to look at websites and how they look on tablets. So people are, hanging out on them more. It's not like your phone where it's just a quick run through your inbox. It's more of an experience.
And that bandwidth and latency part of that, I haven't been able to find any stats, but I think a large majority of tablets are just Wi-Fi only. So you really have to think about, the email is going to get in there, but that doesn't always mean that they're online when they're looking at it.
Sure.
So that's something I've been trying to get people to focus on a lot is you have to tell people where they're going and what they're supposed to be doing because they might not be online.
Well, speaking from experience, so I've got an iPhone and an iPad, and I read on my desktop too, but I know that my phone is my
All at the same time.
Sometimes, if I'm testing
I do that
something,
all
I
the
might
time.
have all at the same time.
You're an early adopter.
But the phone is mostly used for those on-the-go communications. Like I'm at the gym, I'm on the train, and wherever I'm going. But my iPad, I'm usually sitting on the couch at home or I'm in bed, and so I'm a much more engaged user while I'm interacting with my iPad. But there's also the touchscreen factor, right? Like it's still a touchscreen device, so there's a little bit of crossover there, I think, between a more traditional thought of a mobile device or a phone and a tablet, right? There's still those touchscreen factors to think about.
Yeah, and I think that the design decisions that are being made for mobile and for tablets are affecting the web and are affecting email. It's all starting to have the same thing happening. Like you have to have all of your calls to action able for a finger to click on it, not just a mouse. So we're seeing those kinds of design trends across the board, no matter what device you're looking
Bigger
at.
buttons,
Bigger
fat,
buttons.
finger-friendly,
Yeah,
right?
I like big buttons, and I cannot lie. That one.
Can we get that on the Twitter stream? Yeah.
There's also one thing we try to do a lot is bring the app elements of the mobile user experience into the email creative. Like, don't try to reinvent the wheel. Try to use things that people are used to in the right type of situations.
So develop or use the conventions that are already in place on the device itself in the email creative.
Yeah, I call it the Facebook effect. Now we have this one area where we know 750 million people all know how to do this thing to a certain level, or except check their settings. But so use those things that are popular and bring those elements in. So it's not it's not reinventing the wheel. It's being consistent.
Yeah, and that also entices people to click in a way that they wouldn't normally also. It's almost like they expect it to interact a certain way. Like we've seen a lot of, increase in click-through when you do a fake carousel and they expect it to be able to swipe, and so then they just go and they do it and they click on it. And, they want to interact with that content when you make it so easy for them to work with. And then the way, to your point, people are on Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, those are the companies that are defining the way that we interact with content. And they're, giving us a long stream of things to scroll through. Oh, yeah. You just expect to have part of stuff and then click through to see more. It's the way that we're all interacting with content now.
And I think it's changed, your whole welcome experience and your onboarding part. If that doesn't look good on a mobile device, you're DOA for your stats. So if you want to look at messages you should be focusing on, it's the first two. And then educate that, we're mobile friendly, we have a mobile friendly site. Here's what you can do on our mobile friendly site. That's the thing, because a lot of people strip down the content on their mobile site just to those main focus items for a mobile user, but you have to educate them. So, you at any time you can make a purchase of any product on our mobile site. Do these things and you'll see the ripple effect down the line.
So you talked a lot about testing and looking at different devices and how that user experience, but how important is actual rendering, the email displaying appropriately? Is it okay to maybe have a little give and take with different devices? Is the experience more important than the content rendering perfectly, or how do you guys feel about that?
Let's do a poll. How many people have seen a navigation bar on an email just look like Scrabble? How do you feel about that? Does it bother you, or do you shrug it off?
It bothers me.
It bothers me too, but I'm an email creative, so.
Well, yeah, and if you have this, I think it's a branding thing. If you have this nice polished brand, and then all of a sudden your email comes in looking like Scrabble and accessories is 2 lines. It's just I think you're just coming off bad. So I'd like to have a consistent look and feel to my stuff on the web.
So you're in the rendering as first impression is important.
I think it
Can't-
Yeah.
it might not be the most trackable thing in the world, but I definitely think like you look at it and you're like, what the heck is that?
Yeah, I mean, you have to decide what devices and operating systems you're going to support. At a certain point, you can't check everything. I mean, we recently had a client that found that on Comcast, on an iPhone 4, he had a rendering issue. But when we looked at the tiny percentage of people that was affecting and our inability to recreate the rendering issue, at a certain point, you have to say, okay, well, we know it works on these iPhones, we know it works on these Androids, and that has to be good enough. And then that depends too on what your list and your opens look like
so
what
at a certain
percentage.
point, it becomes like the new Lotus Notes, where you just
Yeah.
like decide to ignore it, right?
It's the classic email marketing thing where 3 million people got the email except the CEO.
Right.
Let's troubleshoot this all day long. Everyone else got it.
Yeah,
But he
and it
didn't
looked
get
great.
Yeah, so that brings a wrinkle into, and I think people have to realize that debugging, I mean, mobile devices in your type of reports is like gremlins, every day. There's more and more things to check your email on. So at a certain point, you have to focus on where the numbers are. Like, if you're 30% iPhone and 2% BlackBerry, like, we're going to try our best on the BlackBerry, but let's not go run a couple cycles on 35 people.
Yeah, and also if you're in the B2B space, like keeping your mind on, what is going to happen to RIM BlackBerry and where are all those customers going to go? Are they staying? I mean, they just released a new security development. Staying in touch with what these different operating systems are rolling out will also help you know where to start optimizing and focusing, so you're not kind of caught off guard later when your whole list shifts.
And what I used to do on mobile projects is with the creatives, I would say, you can't be on this project if you don't have a mobile phone. And so, some people were
A
anti.
smartphone or a mobile phone?
Or a smartphone, right? So only us people who understand this, and that's, I think, a really important thing is you have to use these things, and you have to the only way you're going to get inside the mind of it is to be a user. So just make sure that the people who are doing it actually experience this on the
And I
other
think
part
being
of it.
aware, like pinpointing those devices that that your audience is using, and then being aware of how they handle certain things. So I was shocked to recently learn that while BlackBerry 6 has the nice WebKit support, shows HTML email a lot brilliantly than I think many previous versions of BlackBerry did. But if you've got images in your emails, a ton of images, you have to press that BlackBerry button, then press Get Images. Then another window pops up. It says, are you sure, yes or no? And so image blocking is one of the most basic things, has just, I think, reared its ugly head again. It was one of the things you thought about 6 years ago when you were developing emails.
The
but now,
BlackBerry playbook says, we've blocked images for your safety.
Ooh, protect us from the images.
Thank you, BlackBerry. I don't know. I just think it's weird. What's the protection here? But I mean that's a good point. Some people really watch their data plans on their phones, so they don't want images loading because they're looking for every opportunity. I saw a post that said the website The Next Web was sending all these requests and downloading 6 megs. And if you have a 250 meg plan, people are watching that kind of stuff. So the images thing, at least the optimization, they're paying for it at a certain level to get those emails, however indirectly it is. So you need to be aware of that.
And I think that's another thing to point out. I know that Chris Studebaker and Anna Yeaman and I were chatting about this yesterday. If you're doing a responsive design where you're hiding or showing content or doing different kinds of mobile optimized images, the phone is going to download both versions of the email, everything, right? So that's another, I guess, optimization factor, not literal, but literal image optimization. And thinking about that image load and how it's going to affect bandwidth too is
and cleaning your code. But
crazy. So I think we're okay. Let's start questions. Who's got questions for the panel?
I've heard the trend, yesterday with Adrian and now a little bit with you, Akara, that getting a mobile website optimized seems to be more important than optimizing your email first. But I'm kind of curious about the thought process there. It seems a little chicken and egg with me. You can either get the drop off they click through, or the drop off further downstream. And I don't understand entirely which one is better. What are your thoughts on that?
I like to tell people, if we can prove that we can get people to the mobile web, even if it's not good right now, we can get resources to it. Like, listen, we can get people here. There's conversion opportunities. So I think try to get people there first, tie together with the web data. And if you can prove that you can get there, all you got to do is take one of Matt's things and intrigue and, hey, new mobile website. I mean, it's just one email you got to do to relaunch it. So, I mean, I think prove that you can get there from the email part. And then if you can, you've got a resource play with whoever divvies that money out to say there's opportunity here.
And even if you can't do your whole site, it's not a problem to have a small portion of your site that's mobile optimized and the certain actions that you want people to be able to do to make sure that your forms are easy for them to fill out and things like that. So it's okay too to have almost like a small microsite that kind of helps them understand where they're going to go into the bigger site. It just really depends too on what you're trying to get them, what action you're trying to get them to take, and watching that process along the way and making sure that it's as easy as possible for them to figure out what you want them to do.
I was going to add too, if you're in B2B and you don't have mobile optimized landing pages, you all are here. You're traveling a lot, you're on your phone a lot, and so that's a good place to start and practice too with just landing pages.
I was going to say too, compare if you're trying to rectify that chicken and egg scenario, you don't know which way. I want to optimize both, but I don't know. I've got limited resources. I don't know which one to do first. I say look at the traffic coming. Look at your analytics for your website. If you see a great number of folks coming to the website on a mobile device, but you don't see a great number of people opening email on a mobile device, that might be a really good indicator. And other things too, I know when I was doing some research the other day, I was looking at mobile optimized sites, and so if you see certain activities that are happening more frequently, on your website on a mobile phone, so if you see a lot of signups for webinars or signups for this, or people just visiting this one page, if you're a brick and mortar, maybe it makes the most sense to optimize your location pages, right? So I think being smart about looking at the analytics too to decide where to start first can help.
Do you guys see much activity within the preference center? I know there's probably more forgiveness to send a mobile optimized email to just a tablet or a PC versus going the other way where it's just not optimized. So is it too early for a checkbox that says only send me a mobile optimized email without actually sniffing for the OS?
So I've got a couple of responses, and I'll let the panelists, I think, chime in too. But I highly, promote the mobile-first way of thinking, where exactly what you said. I'm getting clapping over here from Matt Caldwell. So a gentleman named Luke W. I always avoid pronouncing his last name in public, but if you look at the Twitter handle at Luke W., he wrote a book called Mobile First, and he talks about just making the mobile experience the first experience, because it's probably going to be a better desktop experience too. So like you said, I think I'm much more forgiving of getting a mobile optimized site on my desktop, because chances are I'm not even going to notice that it was meant for a mobile device. The content's going to be shorter, it's going to have a clear call to action, it's probably a better designed email or a better content created email. So that's my opinion on the matter. But
I can't run this across a huge base, but I have seen that the certain clients that have a higher mobile viewing audience have lower unsubscribe rates. And I think there's a psychology of what's entailed in unsubscribing a lot of times. People know that, oh, I got to go here and I'm going to have to do this and it's going to take me time. So I think it's laziness at a certain point. But if you have, and that's your own debate, it might be good not to have a mobile optimized preference center if you don't want them leaving. But that would be your own decision. I'm not saying you should, but I have seen that people don't unsubscribe as much from the mobile phone.
What about thoughts on the checkbox for sending me mobile optimized
Yeah,
emails?
I think if you're planning to support a mobile version forever and want to keep that as an explicit ask from someone, I think you should try it and see watch those people and how they actually interact with your content. But I totally agree with Justine that what we found is when we do have to pare down the content and the creative and everything, it ends up being a cleaner, much more efficient design across the board.
The tricky thing about asking people to sign up for a mobile version is that's a resource-intensive thing. If you're going to create a specific version just for those folks, the checkbox could also just be like an information gathering resource rather than like a versioning source.
Yeah. Yeah, because it could be more of, are you likely to check your phone or check your email on your phone or something like that that gives you more information about your customer.
People love their phones too. Put a checkbox on your opt-in form. See if they'll tell you.
Well, I think the language around that opt-in too is really important. Like if you say, do you prefer to receive mobile optimized communications? Like I think I read something recently where someone didn't know, like when they ask if you want like HTML or text, a lot of people don't know what HTML email is. Like a lot of consumers don't get that.
People don't know what a browser is.
Yeah, people don't know what a browser is. They say, what's, there was that Chrome survey, right? Where like, do you know what a browser is? And they're like, oh, I don't know. So I think putting that into friendly language, like do you read your email on your smartphone? Rather than saying, do you want a mobile optimized version of this email? Sounds a lot more consumer friendly.
Yeah, I remove the web version from the mobile. Like I lop tons of stuff off the pre-header because it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Another question.
I have a question. There's a tendency to look at mobile as if it's a direct replacement. It's either or. My feeling is that people look at it on both. So it's not that you're now looking at it on mobile and you used to look at it on your desktop. It's now that you're exposed to every email you received twice. Do you see that? Do you agree that that's the case? Or do you think that people who you look at it on the mobile and then never look at it at the desktop,
No.
and if they do look at it twice, what would you suggest people do to leverage that?
I completely agree. Like that idea of a separate mobile version. I think there was a tweet up from the earlier presentation talking about how segmenting on mobile. I would never recommend segmenting mobile users to anyone because you cannot predict where people are going to open. People open on mobile, they later open on their desktop. I know we've got some stats. Chris did some, analysis on some campaigns that did over Exact Target and saw that a fair number of people do open on both. And that's where that mobile first concept comes into play, where I need to take into account a range of experiences, anywhere from like a 27-inch, beautiful iMac screen down to like the poorest, if I'm using a Palm OS or something, right? So you have to, I think, take into account all those things for the email and not do this crazy versioning either or scenario.
Yeah, and that's like the IMAP versus POP. If it's IMAP'd, it's going to be marked as red everywhere, versus if it's like a POP type of thing, then they're going to have to come back and deal with it again. So I think to hedge against that to experience type of thing, you have to be memorable in your subject line. You have to have something memorable about it, so you're leaving behind a reason to come back to it. Yep. Versus being cutesy and campy and not really having like if you have an offer, you have to put it out there so they'll be able to go back to it on the desktop and remember what it was.
Yeah, and from a technical standpoint, the media queries kind of helps having you have both versions available depending on your.
I just want to make one point to what Della was saying. In some research that I did or the Trendline did with the Exact Target, we looked at how people were converting off of their smartphone. The biggest driver was email. Consumers said, hey, the most common reason I'm going to convert off of an advertising message from a smartphone is because of email. And then how they actually do that conversion tends to be back on their laptop, right? So there is this cross-channel intersection of the two. So you can't say you're either a smartphone user or you're a desktop user. It's both and. So.
Hi. One question that we get a lot with clients is, how, as their mobile audience grows, is that affecting some of the main KPIs, like open rates and stuff like that? Have you guys done testing? Have you seen any trends on that?
I've seen the open rate go up and the click-through go down. A lot.
I know that actually, so Della and I were on a panel together at AdTech a few weeks back, and he was seeing more conversion rate. So if you're looking beyond like opens and clicks and going like to in-store purchases and that type of thing, just based upon subject lines, because on a mobile device, when you actually open the email, and this happens on BlackBerry, it happens on the iPhone, I think it happens on all of them, what you actually see in like the first, like if a phone had a preview pane, so the first top half of the screen gets taken up with the subject line. And so I think that's another huge consideration there. And so subject lines start driving those other like factors as well.
And you have to get fierce with attribution, because the old standard email metrics just don't apply. You have to start looking at the other sources and putting a picture together, because if you're just going off open and click, it's not going to tell you the whole picture anymore.
Yeah. And I think Anna was going to kill me for calling her out, but she recently did a redesign, I think, on Savvy Mom. She's got a really great blog post on it, and I think she saw, 2 times increased click to open ratio on the mobile version that she designed for them. So I think it's heading in the right direction, right? I think people are just moving past that discovery phase and just starting to do implementation. So we're going to see a lot more stats coming up. But
I think if that person's in your database and you're sending them messages and then they're purchasing somewhere else, you better be going and grabbing a slice of claim chowder on that type of stuff. Like, I helped that happen. I want some credit.
Cool. Well, I think claim chowder is a good way to wrap it up.
Yeah, I think claim chowder kind of that sets the bar. All right, well, this is another one of the topics that is going to be continued in the roundtable. So if this is something that is of interest to you, we'll be able to chat about that just before lunch. So thank you to our panel.